things need to change. The reason I get called into companies is because they recognize something needs to change. And my job is to be able to identify it and put a plan together to overcome it. And you can't do it if you can't be honest about it. I will say I give total credit to my last company. They invested quite a bit in leadership training, and it really helped give me the tools to be able to have some of those conversations about it. That, again, it's not about the person, it's about the process, and that changes the tone. And it's important that every member of the team understand it and understand how they provide value towards getting there, but that's not the thing that's their day-to-day goal. They have much more immediate things they need to focus on than worrying about, the overall company KPIs, because they may not be able to impact those things.
Okay, we're here with Laurel. Laurel, introduce yourself.
Well, I'm Laurel Zacher. I'm the CEO and founder of LZ Strategic, and I offer fractional CMO and CXO services strictly for the multifamily industry. I've been in the industry now 32 years, I think last month, and it has literally gone by in the blink of an eye. But in that time, I've been both on the owner side, operator side, but also on the service provider side. So it's given me a really unique insight into the industry, how we've evolved, and understanding both sides of our business as well. So, and now here I am doing it on my own.
Well, first of all, congratulations.
Thank you.
It's a huge endeavor, big challenge.
It
but
is.
also big reward. So I'm just very excited to hear more about your journey and that you're here with us today.
Well, the short version is 6 months ago, I left my company, and honestly didn't know what I was going to do next. But I knew I was really lucky, and a lot of people aren't in the same position, where I could take the time. And I had calls with everybody. I had calls with my friends. I had calls with the different partners that I had worked with, calls with different companies that we had engaged in services, and just explored and chatted. And they all wanted to know how they could help me. I'm like, well, tell me about what you're doing. Tell me about where you think the industry's going. Some were great and gave me a ton of referrals. Others just were really encouraging, and others said, "Here's what you need to know if you do decide to start your own business." And over time, it just sort of evolved, honestly. I wish I could say I was one of those people that had a very clear vision and 6 steps of how I was going to succeed. I wasn't. I was lucky, and I took advantage of every opportunity that come my way. And there were people that had approached me about some short-term projects. So I said, yes, I did it. And it turns out I loved it. I love sort of the short-term strategic nature of it. Get in, do great work, get out. And that resonated with the customers that I was working with. And then finally, I'm like, well, I think I need to make it official and launch a real company and take care of the taxes and the paperwork and the licenses. And nobody tells you about all of that.
No one tells you that.
Holy smokes. I figured it out. I think I have like 5 different business licenses and types of licenses and sign-offs in the state of Nevada, where I'm based, plus my federal tax paperwork. I'm like, man, be prepared for that.
I think we only had to get 1 license. Is it because of the different types of work that you do?
Could be. I know I started with my EEIN with the IRS, and then state of Nevada filing, Clark County, Clark County DBA, the city of Henderson, since I'm home based, and I had to go get zoning sign off.
Oh, wow.
For the city as well. Yeah, I spent a good afternoon at City Hall.
It's interesting. There's a lot of people incorporating in Nevada, and I would have thought that meant less paperwork versus
it's quite possible it's because it's a home-based business that there were a couple extra little things. Now that I know it, I could totally fly through it, and it turns out most of it was available for me to do online, but I did it wrong, so I learned the hard way. Such is life.
So what do you think the difference is between you being at a management company and now when you're not? When you were talking about it, you made it sound like you can get in and move more quickly. So what do you think that's about?
It turns out, so I love that. I do love, I love long-term projects, but I also, and I lean into this as well, I have ADHD. So I love fast, quick, and purpose driven with results. I'm very results oriented, just generally speaking. And the ability to do that, prove the results, and then get out like totally suits my personality and my work style. Where if something is, you're taking sort of the long road, like a 3-year type of project, that is not as much in my wheelhouse or suit
Mm-hmm.
my personality. So that's part of the difference of this sort of work that really jives
Yeah.
with what I'm
About
looking to
how
do.
long are typical projects? I'm sure they range depending on the scope and the
Absolutely.
deliverables, but do you have so far kind of an average project length?
So they varied. I've had some that were short as 2 weeks, 3 weeks. I was doing a contract review for a
Okay.
company that I was going through all of their marketing agreements, understanding where they could perhaps streamline, where there might be overlap in service, figuring out where they had MSAs and where they didn't, and actually helping write a plan for them to be able to streamline costs and improve efficiency as well. That only took a couple of weeks and meeting with them back and forth, easy. I'm on longer term projects right now too that are going to be easily 4 months, and then some other ones that I'm working on that could go up to 6 months that are extending. I'm now booked out through third quarter
Wow,
for my
that's
time.
exciting.
Yeah. So I mean, it's been hard work to get
Yeah.
here, but it feels really good to sort of have some stability now because it's when you're starting something, you guys know, it's a little nerve wracking. You don't know where you're going to go. If you knew then what you know now, you do some things differently, and you might even relax a little more,
Yeah.
Yeah.
enjoy it a little more.
You got there
That's
quick.
where I'm at.
Because didn't you say 6 months?
Mhm.
You already figured out you should relax more? So it took us
Couple
7 years. I feel like I just figured that out. Um, I was wondering if it was more culturally, like when you are at a company full time, you kind of feel like, all right, I gotta be a little gentle, walk on eggshells. I don't want to tip over anything. But when you're, coming in as like project based or something, I could imagine just feeling like, hey, whoever the person that hired you, it's like these are the deliverables I'm gonna get, and so I gotta go. And they want to see
Yeah.
progress. Because to keep the retainer or however you base the project, and so it almost feels like there's a cultural thing about how, or maybe it's more of a personal ownership where you feel more like, all right, I'm allowed to move a little faster
Yeah.
versus when you're full time. This is just me imagining,
And maybe
extrapolating.
ruffle a few feathers if
Sure.
necessary.
Yeah.
So you're touching on something as well that I've discovered about myself. Now, first of all, I've always been called candid, which I put in air quotes, from all sorts of partners that I've worked with, whether it's service partners or within the organization. I am just a direct communicator, and I'll state it like it is, right? Now I have the freedom, because I'm only representing my own brand, I have the freedom to say exactly what I think about
Mm.
any process, or even if it's a sacred cow within an
Mm.
organization or our industry, I'll say it. Now, I also admit that doesn't mean I'm right all the time. And I'm quick to apologize or make corrections if it turns out I'm wrong, but I will say it rather than hold it back like I used to. I used to be more, and it's kind of the nature of getting ahead within an organization, right? Is working around the politics. I
Mhm.
care a lot less about the politics. I certainly don't want to be a jerk. I want to be fun to work with. I want people to be happy to work with me and know they're going to get results, and we're going to have a good time in the process too. But if something needs to be called out, I'm not going to worry as much about calling it out.
Yeah. Is that
That's
more
great.
like Nicole and I have talked about this as our company got bigger? Like it started with just the three of us, the three founders, and then there's 130 some odd people now. And as we got to different sizes, there were times when the executive team was very aligned and they all felt the same way. And particularly like when the three of us started, we were all like, all right, we're pretty focused. And then as it got bigger, there's different. Um, I don't know, just opinions, I guess, on like directions things should go. And it's like, okay, now we all need to disagree in the room, but then commit when we're out of the room, which I found challenging at times because I'm like, it's not really authentic for me to say, like, I totally believe in this thing that we're doing. So I'm wondering if now with this project basis we're talking about, where you feel like, okay, you don't have to like almost like be the mouthpiece as much. Like, sure, there's still that back, like you don't want to be saying like these people made silly decisions,
Right.
but you can just be a little bit more open with your own views throughout the process. Be like, well, this is the way we're doing it, and then
Mhm.
this is the best way to do it if we're doing it that way.
Yeah, I never want to call out a person, right? Because
Right.
people make the best decisions they can with the information that they have. And I truly believe that. However, I will call out a process if it isn't serving the company, the person, the industry as a whole. I have no problem doing that. And yeah, I will like within the small group, I also believe in, praising publicly and criticizing privately.
Mm.
So sometimes those really hard conversations do happen one-on-one, on a Zoom call in a closed door meeting, because I'm not here to put anybody else on blast,
Right.
but things need to change. The reason I get called into companies is because they recognize something needs to change, and my job is to be able to identify it and put a plan together to overcome it. And you can't do it if you can't be honest about it. I
Mm-hmm.
will say I give total credit to my last company. They invested quite a bit in leadership training, and it really helped give me the tools to be able to have some of those conversations about it. That, again, it's not about the person, it's about the process, and that changes the tone. And I've carried it to this day, and it's really serving
Yeah,
to be able to do that.
it's incredible. You mentioned right before we started recording kind of the shift in the industry for more, marketing teams to either be more consultant based or
Mhm.
to shift to more fractional work. What do you think kind of caused that shift, and where do you see it going?
Well, I've seen, especially in the last 6 months, a reduction in marketing leadership within our industry. Now, that isn't unusual. I've been in the industry 32 years, so I've seen it happen cyclically before. When we turn into a recession, when budgets get greatly constrained, marketing is often impacted, and marketing personnel and leadership tend to be impacted. So I was about a year ago was putting a bet on that happening within the industry, and here we are. And I wish I was wrong, but there are a lot of really exceptional, talented people that are in the market now, and there's only so many jobs. There's only so much leadership opportunity out there, and we're sort of all figuring it out all at the same time. I have conversations with my peers that are also doing the same thing and are doing more of this fractional work. Now, going back to partially what you said, that's sort of the supply side, but what's the demand side? Well, if you do continuously cut marketing leadership, you end up with teams who are full of really exceptional doers, but they have less and less time to be planners and strategists. And at a certain point, you're still executing on the plan from 2 and 3 years ago because you simply haven't had the opportunity to be able to do the next 3 to 5 year strategy session, right?
Yeah.
You're really putting out fires more than being strategic about where you're going to avoid the fires. And that's the nature of it. It isn't any person's fault that that happens. That is the nature of this sort of structure and fallout of it. So the companies that I'm working with, not in every instance, but certainly in some of them where they're asking me to come in as fractional CMO, they really need strategies. I'm working with one an ownership group, who wants to put together a customer experience strategy and really take ownership back from the PMC with owning their customers, and their customer data, partnering with the PMC, partnering with the ownership group, but they may keep a lot of it with the PMC, and using their preferred partners, but they're really thinking through, and that's really at the end of the day, all I'm providing them with is a document that says, if you guys want to do it yourself, then here's how you can do it. If you want to keep it with your PMC, here's what you can do it, but maybe what you adjust. But somebody has to have the time and the experience to come up with the plan. That's just one example, but it's the sort of thing you have to have personnel to do it. And the CEO is often not the person that can do it. And your person who is placing ads every day is often not the person who can do it either.
Totally. I'm like nodding furiously because we have experiences with Digible ourselves over the last few years. It's like we've grown marketing. There's been some, contraction there. And I feel like we're still, right now we're hiring for a head of growth, which will oversee our marketing, department as well. But it's really for someone to kind of set that strategy and vision and align with more of the higher level company goals and kind of be that bridge between, the company level initiatives and then what the team needs, at the ground level. So it's definitely a hard balance to strike for sure.
And I think there's also, you touched on sort of where the gap is. Often marketing executors are focused on their department KPIs, right? But head of marketing often, in my experience, needs to align with operational KPIs and overall business KPIs. And it's important that every member of the team understand it and understand how they provide value towards getting there. But that's not the thing that's their day-to-day goal. They have much more immediate things they need to focus on than worrying about, the overall company KPIs, because they may not be able to impact those things. Those might be sales, they might be more accounting, they might be asset management goals, but how do we help them succeed?
Yeah, I'll give an example for us where we struggled is before when we had executives wearing multiple hats, that it would be like, okay, we'd be in the room, and so we work on EOS. Have you ever heard of EOS?
Mm.
It's a really interesting way to operate a business, but it does everything from like set your 10-year vision down to your 3-year, to your 1 year, to your quarterly goals, and then down to your weekly meetings and what should you be tracking as your data points in each of those weekly meetings.
And
It's
EOS stands for the Entrepreneurial Operating System.
yeah,
just
it's
to give-
phenomenal.
We love acronyms in this industry. So just
Yeah,
It's
well,
all
and I
the
think
acronyms.
in many other industries, like in all these other entrepreneurial groups that Nicole and I are a part of, uh, I'd say like 60% of people are using EOS. But in this industry, I haven't met a management company that's using it. And I think it would be interesting for the industry to take a look
Mm.
at. But anyways, we've always every year we come in and do the annual, and as I feel like we've been very good planners, like we always, and yet we are conservative, so we will underestimate our growth from every year that happened. Like our bank will give them, here's what we think our growth will be, and then we blow past it, and they're like, well, why didn't you shoot higher? It's like, well, because we want to make sure we hit our targets that we go after, and it's still really good growth. But where I'm going to is like that plan in 1 year changes dramatically versus 3, as you said. Like, so if you lose the leadership 3 years ago, it should have been adjusted many times throughout that process. And then the example I was going to give about like now when you hire someone that comes in and has their marketing KPIs, we've gone through periods where it's like, okay, we're going to hire this headcount, and now it's going to be, marketing qualified leads or whatever is like there is what they see as their goal. But then which then means basically new PMCs to us. And in reality, Digible's growth is like 85% from current business. So it's more of a land and expand model where we just get more business from our current PMCs. And so, and there's only so much business we can take at any one time. And so you'll have someone in marketing trying to push a bunch of new leads. And it's like, if we grab all those, we won't be able to service our current clients, and then service will degrade, and then our reputation will be fumbled. And so in reality, it needs to be more operational to say like, okay, it's about, I don't know, total dollar growth or something, and marketing can skate towards helping current clients if that's what makes sense or whatever. But that makes it harder because then it's like, what did marketing really do to help grow current clients versus like, isn't that the customer success team? Didn't they actually help grow the current clients? So that's where alignment and some, I'd say, grace, I think, is really helpful amongst those departments, because otherwise you become very territorial. And it's the whole, you see this, where I see this in marketing with the PMCs is marketing is told, give me more leads, and the on-site teams are like, I don't know, they get the answer on average about 50% of the phone calls that come in. And it's like, look, we don't need to spend more money and get more leads because we just need to answer the calls we're getting. But it's kind of opposing one another because they slam more, which then makes the on-site team more overwhelmed, and
100%.
cascading cycle.
I've seen it over and over and over again. And I think that one of the mindset shifts that I've been trying to talk about is changing from looking at the marketing department as overhead and look at them as part of the revenue stream and a revenue driver, which is what they are in other organizations. In hospitality and SaaS, marketing isn't purely an expense line item. In multifamily, it almost always is. But you also have a seat at the revenue table in other industries as well, understanding that 70% of our leads come from online. That was from the 2024 NMHC renter survey with Kingsley. If 70% of our leads are coming from online, they're not coming from walk-in, they're not coming from referrals, it's from online leads. How is marketing not a revenue driver? That's what's driving the leasing that's happening in our industry. And how do we not have them also focused on retention strategies as well? Why aren't we partnering and doing more there to study that? So how do we get marketing more aligned with revenue? I think is a place we need to go. as an industry in order to improve performance overall. So that's not always a popular discussion to have because they really like the silos. But I think the more we break down the silos and have, again, shared KPIs and really understanding of how the two work together, it's not always about cutting marketing. It's sometimes increasing, obviously, that investment in new strategies to be more effective long term, but you have to be able to take a wider view for the outcomes and not be so tactic focused and more like financial outcomes. How is it improving property performance? How is it improving overall revenue? Those sorts of things I think we need to talk about more in marketing. And I just don't hear a lot of it, again, from the day-to-day people. And I really encourage them to learn how to talk about what they're doing through the lens of an asset manager. I think it'll help them be tremendously successful that way.
You mentioned like that mindset, and I would have to think the companies that you're working with that are bringing you in, you're doing a lot more than, the marketing piece. You're really coaching on the leadership mindset and the collaboration and having them posing questions to them that have them think differently about integrating.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm curious if you could speak a little bit to that, because I'm sure it goes beyond, what you're really brought in to do.
Yeah, that's a good point. There's what I'm asked to do, what's in the proposal and the agreement, and then there's, at the end of the day, what really happens. You're right, there is a lot of that because I'm only there for a limited amount of time, right? And whether it's I'm working with senior leadership, with the C-suite, or with the existing marketing team, sometimes it's coaching of the marketing teams on how to think strategically. Sometimes it's working with them. I'll set strategy, but they will execute. But they need to be prepared to know how to execute. And it's things like, how are you going to report back on this? How are you going to show success? How are you going to know when you've hit the numbers and you've hit those KPIs? And that's a coaching moment as well. So luckily I have 16 years of leading marketing teams and that coaching aspect, so I can do that. But you're right, sometimes it's also working with asset management and executives who know nothing about marketing and really explaining how it works. How do we measure success? How do you know if it's working or not? And it just helps them grasp the bigger picture of it as well, and really helping them. The most interesting thing for me is helping them define where they want to go. They don't often know. Well, I shouldn't say that. Some that I've worked with had very clear ideas of where they wanted to go and what they wanted to achieve. Others didn't, but that's why they knew they wanted help to come in and sort of workshop it and work through it to figure out, I can steer the ship in 360 degrees, but which 1 degree should I steer it in, at least to start? And that's some of the things that I work through with them as well.
I want to go back a little bit to when you mentioned, marketing has kind of had a or bumpy couple of years, like let's say, and I feel like we've been in the industry like a decade, and it feels like it's always kind of bumpy. I don't, as far as like changes at different organizations and stuff. What is your theory on why we don't see more CMOs? Because you had mentioned that people since you stepped out and hung your own shingle, that they're looking for fractional CMO work.
Mm-hmm.
Why do most of the groups we work with, do I see cap out at like VP or SVP or whatever of marketing? Why doesn't anybody give the CMO title?
Well, again, my opinion, and you could talk to owners and operators, and they might have a completely different opinion. So mine is from an outside lens looking in, right? So take that for what it's worth. But C-suite all has business growth responsibility. Now, not just in general, but really as a named member of leadership, and you have direct revenue responsibility as well, in addition to all of the legal responsibilities that come with those as well. I think that's part of the reason why. I think there's a perception that marketing is not a revenue driver, and it is strictly a cost center. And until that perception changes, I don't think you're going to see many CMO roles. You see a few CXO roles, and I think that's great that we're moving in that direction. I think that also is needed. But it's newer. It's newer in the industry and outside of the industry as well. But honestly, I think that's why. And I think maybe that's part of what feeds into why I talk about marketing needs to be better at proving and being less humble about how we drive revenue, but we've got to be great at being able to talk about it and talk about the numbers to be able to prove that we're driving revenue and not just expense.
This is great. I feel like I'm learning something that's bothered me for years. So years ago, you had mentioned like sort of teaching people about the business, and I had read the book Birth of a Building. I thought that was super helpful for me on the vendor side, learning like how does a building get developed and like what are the economics, how do we get the loans, but it didn't talk about the structure of the management companies. With the way you were describing it, made me feel like it's almost like attorneys or big consulting firms like McKinsey, where you become like a partner, like at the top, and you have like a share of things. And so this is where I'm hoping you can educate me. It sounds like when you get the C-suite title, you start. It's almost like one of those where you're like an anointed a partner, if you will, and then but different language. It's just the executive team, and then you have certain responsibilities or expectations about how much business you bring in. So you're nodding. So is that
Mhm.
because I have a follow up, but just do you need to
Yeah, I mean,
expand there?
you have real responsibility. So I don't know anyone that I've worked with or who I met and have consulted with that's in the C-suite that is purely honorary, right?
Okay.
They have real responsibility for driving fundamental business growth, whether it's through developments or through investments or through a million other things that they're doing. They have real responsibility in moving the business, not just moving the business forward in general, but in real specific ways that either directly or indirectly impact revenue. Because
Yeah.
at the end of the day, that's what a for-profit business is about,
Sure.
is driving revenue and driving growth through revenue.
So what's fascinating about that is many times our clients, like from our experience on the marketing vendor side, we'll get like a frantic phone call that's like, "Hey, I just got this property on Friday and I need it live on Monday because like I didn't know it was coming down the pike or whatever." And we're like, "How did you not know it was coming?" It's like, whatever, the business development cycle, blah blah blah. But then a lot of times we'll have a call with like scheduled with one of our folks for like a monthly reporting call, and they'll say, "Hey, I need to move this call because I've got a pitch to go on." And when I ask them about the pitch, like, "Oh, well, we have this big lead come in that we're working, and we wanted to do this like custom charcuterie board that like flowers and whatever. They like are decking out the like meeting to show how personalized and custom they can be to that, I don't know, that owner's interests or for the area or what have you." And when I dig, it just seems like they're a pretty essential part of the presentation for winning the business. So I'm surprised, and maybe they didn't, I guess, then generate that original lead for the business. That was more the biz dev
Mm-hmm.
folks or whatever. But as far as like closing it, it seems like they are essential for like helping close it.
I agree. And in fact, something that I had recently seen was I believe Avenue 5 is actually hiring for marketing support in different markets strictly to help support pitching the new business. I believe those are some of the job postings that I've seen have sent out to some connections. But it's really partnering with business development
Yeah.
and creating those decks, taking them off of day-to-day property marketing or overall digital marketing, and really strictly focusing on the sales process to support them to drive the business. And they're going in to do the pitches with them. I think that's a great strategy. So shout out to Avenue 5 for that.
Yeah. I mean, that's honestly how we built the Digible business. We do not have sales, people or business development executives. We brought in the account management team to the initial pitch to say, here is, Kenzie's here. Here's Kenzie. This is who you would be working with, and let her walk you through an example monthly call or an example onboarding. And so I think showing like bringing those folks into that process earlier, it's just a win-win. Like
Yeah.
it's a real world example. There's no over promising, under delivering. It's really like, here's what you're going to get. And I feel like that helped us really shortcut, removing us from the process as founders and say, let me just put you in touch with the team.
Yeah.
Here's who you're going to be working with, and like let them show you
Well,
what experience you're getting.
That's another example, right, of breaking down the silos between these different organizations so that you can onboard seamlessly. Now, I've had experiences where we were we had, what am I thinking of? They did, there's a property and they did but they did a bid for it, and they won the bid, and they got it like in 24 hours. They put in a crazy low price, and they got it, and they go, but the deal is we have to onboard in 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, All right, well, that means all hands on deck, and we're dropping everything else because we've got to get everything built out, including it isn't only about marketing. Marketing can turn things around fairly quickly, at least to launch, and then we can adapt from there. But you've got to think about things like banking and setting up new bank accounts. New bank accounts take 2 weeks
Mm-hmm.
to set up. Everything flows from that. Accounting needs to start. Systems can't start until banking is set up because you can't create a merchant account. Understanding that process and that business part of the business is why I think it's so critical to elevate so we can do our part to make things like that actually happen.
Totally. I was going to say, like, for the team listening, they're going to mention, well, that doesn't always scale. At
Right.
some point, you're going to run into the bottleneck of like scaling that experience. How do you scale a custom tailored experience to be able to onboard seamlessly with quick turnaround times? For us, we're at 2,000 to 3,000 properties now. And so it just presented, new challenges. And in my view, it's like you can put different processes in place to solve those problems, but really prioritizing what's important. How do you protect that experience that your client is getting?
Exactly right. And it goes back to the 80-20 rule. If 80% of the time you are doing the same process, it's always the same timeline, it's the same process. You might make tweaks with things, again, with marketing. You might tweak which packages you're on, how much you're investing in digital, those sorts of things. But if 80% of the time you're able to launch and have a really well planned out plan, and you repeat it over and over and over again, you have the time to be able to make those adjustments for the other 20% because something's going to come up. But if you're doing 100% custom every single time, that isn't supportable in any business or any department. But you need to be able to walk through what is that 80% of the time that we can repeat. Anything, and I talk about this with marketing automation and AI as well. If you can repeat it, you can automate it.
Totally.
Right. And those are great candidates for things like marketing automation and having AI leasing agents helping with things like that. That's just one example, and that's more on the office and the office team side. But same thing within the marketing teams, right? It isn't, you're going to set up a Google business profile. You're going to need to claim all the listings. You're going to need to set up for social and a million other things. So start that early, have the process ready to go so it isn't a fire every time it happens.
I wanted to underscore something that both of you brought up. One, Laurel, when you were saying it's good to understand the total business, and then Nicole, you saying about how things don't scale. Where I'm connecting it here is because we learned about the business early, meaning how this worked for the bank account example. As I mentioned, our customers will call us and say, we need this set up, in just a couple days. And so we built our processes to be live within 3 to 5 days, depending. And we can do it in one day if we have to, if we have that slack, and if we're trying to help someone. But oftentimes they're like, when it comes to our competitors, the way they bill is like, hey, we need your credit card for the property in order to because they want you to cover the media cost of Google or Facebook. That makes sense because it's a risk. For us, we decided early on, this is going to put a lot of strain on us, but let us cover the cost of the media so that we can get you launched now. Because otherwise what would happen is Laurel calls us like, I need this property live this week, and but I don't have a bank account yet. It's like, so I don't have a credit card yet, so therefore I can't start my campaign for 2 or 3 weeks. And that doesn't make Laurel look good if the new owner that you want is like, so are my campaigns launched? And Laurel's like, no, because we're waiting for blah, blah, blah. And so it could be a month of dead time. And so that makes it hard for you, to hit your goals and for them to hit their goals because you can't actually, there's a real big disruption in switching.
Exactly.
And that makes them hesitant to switch in the future. So instead for us, we're like, well, we have a bank account set up. We'll just take on the risk of fronting the media cost and then bill you afterwards. And that made it really challenging for the first 4 years for cash flow purposes for our business. Yet it also very much accelerated why people jumped on to use Digible in the first place because of the ease of use of okay, we're good. And then just for those other vendors listening, I think we've had 3 defaults.
I was going to say less than 5.
Yeah, in the 8 years that we've been doing it, thousands of properties. So it's really, that's what's great about this industry is our customers treat us very well. If there's a problem with the building, they still make sure we get paid, which is not like other industries we've worked in. And so that's why we could take that risk. There's one other thing though connected to that. So that's where Laurel, if the marketer really wanted to use a certain vendor and that vendor has these other payment terms where we need a credit card, that's where it would be helpful for that marketer to then tell the vendor hey, I hear you. this is the reason. I would love to use you, but could you please adjust your billing terms? I need you to work with me here because I want to use you, but I can't because of yada yada. But if you help educate the vendor, then that vendor may, I don't know if make an exception, but they at least would understand why maybe now you're not going with them in the future.
Yeah, and I've been in that position. In fact, I've made that change before
Mm.
with vendors where I always had a corporate card for my department for use just for things like that.
Mm.
But it means I have extra paperwork,
Yeah.
right? And it's a small thing, but it means at the end of the month, I now have all of these credit card statements to reconcile
Uh-huh.
and then charge back. And our accounting team has to charge back rather than just writing the check.
Yeah.
And so that's a tiny decision that comes out of a thing like that we can't control, like the bank account getting set up. And because of that, and I was tired of filling out the paperwork all the time, that I ended up changing partners just because one made it much easier than another to work with them, given the things I was challenged with. And it isn't even me, it isn't even the whole department. It was just
Totally.
me
Yeah.
and me handling the paperwork. And I just got tired of doing it because I have such limited time, or did at the time,
Yeah.
such limited time doing it. And that made a huge decision for a big part of our budget.
Yeah. Well, cool. That. I appreciate you sharing that because I hadn't heard. It makes sense. You almost have like a petty cash card that you could use, but I have not met someone that loves doing reconciliation
Mhm.
or like, taking pictures of the receipts or whatever. And then even if if it was like, well, the vendor says like, oh, you could switch back to your other card once you have it. It's like that's still work that you have to do. You have to now go and
Exactly.
switch it, and that's work for them too. Like, vendor, do you really want to now switch for every property 45 days afterwards and try
Yeah.
to match everything up? So
If you do good work, you deliver on the promise, on your brand promise, right? And you make it easy to work with, that is who I want to work with 9 times out of 10,
yeah,
right? The only time I don't work, whoever has that combination, is when I'm usually when I'm mandated to work with for different reasons, right? Very good, solid reasons. But up to me, that's what I'm always looking for.
mm,
Is who's easy to work with, is going to deliver on and by the way, don't overpromise. If you can't do something, don't tell me you can,
yeah,
because now it erodes trust. And I'd
Totally.
much rather work with somebody who's doing maybe not 100%, but 90% of what I need,
yeah.
but is actually doing it consistently and well.
Yeah, they can walk in eyes wide open.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I totally agree. I wanted to ask what has surprised you since going off on your own. Like you had certainly hired folks for these types of projects or different things in the past. Now you're doing it, and once you do it yourself, you must have found some things that surprised you or just weren't as you expected. So what
Yeah.
comes to mind?
Well, we already touched on the paperwork. The amount of paperwork as an entrepreneur is ridiculous. And be prepared for quarterly taxes.
Yeah.
So that's real. And anyone going out on their own, think about that. Well, another thing that surprised me was maybe it's a difference in me and my attitude about just how frank I may be about something, but the willingness to hear it, when even if it's critical of a process. I'm experiencing and working with ownership groups and the PropTech companies that really wanted to hear it, and at least know, and having an unfiltered view
Mm.
from the outside looking in, without having, I'm not going to say a lot of yes people, but I don't have anything to gain or lose by telling the unfiltered truth about how I see something. That surprised me of how much people want that authenticity. And again, whether they agree or disagree, they at least want to know what I think about it and genuinely want to know. That has surprised me how much need there is for that. Yeah, I would say that's probably the biggest one. And I've also learned a lot about myself that surprised me. Things like I was having a conversation yesterday. We're talking about the business and just being booked out, and I'm in a really lucky spot, right? And they said, well, the person I was talking to said, well, are you going to hire employees so that you can continue to grow? I'm like, you know what? No, I don't want to. I've learned I don't want to grow. I don't want to create an entire conglomerate. I want to do the work that I'm responsible for doing. And if that means limiting opportunities, I'm making a conscious choice to do that because I really just want to be on my own doing it, at least for a while.
Yeah.
Totally.
And
Yeah.
I didn't, I had never even thought of that I would be in that place. I'm like, yeah, no, I'm making a choice and I'm good with it.
I think that's so admirable because we are in a ton of different like founder networks, and you don't see it often of that conscious choice, right? It's either we're kind of just hiring people to hire people and to grow and scale. But when you really push someone on, but why? What's the end goal? Or what is your plan in 5 years, 10 years? It's like they're just so caught up in the energy, because there's a lot of energy when you're starting a new business and momentum, and you want to ride that wave. And if you don't stop to actually ask yourself that question, it could really get away from you in a good or a bad way. So I just think that's so admirable that you're making that decision.
Well, I think part of it is because, having been in the industry so long, I've worked with so many different companies out there, and I've worked with ones that have really grown exponentially very quickly, but didn't always have all of the staffing and the support teams in place to be able to support the growth. And I've been, as the customer, on the receiving end of what that is like. I just don't want to do that.
Totally.
And frankly, I don't want the paperwork. Did I mention the paperwork? I don't want that goes with, like, people are great. I love people. I don't want to have them on the team. And just really, for now anyway, be just responsible for myself.
I like that you said for now, because it can change. A lot of entrepreneurs feel like they've made the choice and that's the choice, right? And I like, as Nicole's saying, like, you being deliberate about it, because there are other people that they go out on their own because they want to just they like doing the IC work, but also like
time.
Yeah, the freedom of time. But then as soon as you hire employees, it's like having like children in a way. Like, now you're responsible, and therefore, like, you have to be available for them, and like or you want to be available for them because you want to give them a good experience, which then all of a sudden you no longer have that freedom that you were looking for originally, that many were looking for originally. And so it's this. And then it looks like failure if you're like, you know what, I'm going to pull back and just be myself now. And you're worried about what that will leave on your business, or what people will think of it because you pulled back from having employees. So yeah, it's an important choice.
I want none of that. I don't want to step into that fray even a little bit. Like, nope, this is really good. I'm really happy. I like this. And again, could change in a year, could change in 6 months. But I also don't want to feel the pressure to have to continuously grow for the sake of growth. And I feel like that's kind of a trap that I've seen people fall into as well. Again, when you have that 3, 5, 10-year plan, and that's part of the plan, that's great. Then I'm like, go for it. But that isn't necessarily part of my plan for me. I've gotten a lot of great advice, really well-meaning advice as well, from friends, from colleagues, from others who are independent. And not all of it is right for me and my business goals or my life goals. And I need to take it in, and then you've got to learn how to filter through what is right for you and what's going to work, and what is right for the person giving the well-meaning advice and is right for them. But you'll have to be okay with knowing what to reject and what to keep, and sort of get tougher about it as well, for yourself. And frankly, care a lot less about what people think about you, because when you do step into this role, you get a lot more people that talk about you. Good, bad, and ugly, all of it. But you have to have a tough skin as well. And that's another thing that surprised me, is I'm very sensitive, but I'm also tougher than I thought I was.
Yeah, it's very wise. You have great, you got there quick, like the whole 6 or 7 months, because for us, even when we started, it felt like survival. Like, we were like, we just have to make this work. And then it took us, I don't know, I think like 4 years to get cash flow positive. And so by that point, it was to get to the cash flow positive, we just had a certain momentum that Nicole talked about. So, and we hadn't done the self-discovery to say, okay, what do we want our day-to-day life to be like once we're default alive? And so by that point, because we hadn't done it, it was like, well, we're on this train of like growing basically for growth's sake, like to be big. It would be awkward now to stop it. And now we need to go, though. We now need to go and decide, is that what we really want? Or, just what do we want our lives to be like? So it took us a long time to get there.
Well, I did an extraordinary amount of research as well. I was listening to all the podcasts. I was talking again to my friends who are entrepreneurs who have gone on their own. I was reading all the books and listening, like Consulting 101 on Amazon, right? And thinking through all of these things that I had to think through. And it was really being intentional about trying to learn and recognizing, I don't know what I'm about to step into. I need to learn fast. My husband also said I'm probably the hardest working person he's ever known that didn't have a job at the time. One of the songs that has played on loop in my head is a Beyonce song. I was talking to Justin Jones about it yesterday, and it's diva from Beyonce. A diva is another word for a hustler. Diva is a female version of a hustler, of a hustler. And honestly, that song gets stuck in my head, and I'm like, yeah, I am a hustler, and that's just what I'm doing.
Yeah.
I'm figuring it out as I go, but I'm okay with the ambiguity of figuring it out as I go. But part of that I do think comes with experience and knowing yourself, and it means you can sort of make a lot of these little micro decisions faster along the way, and it doesn't have to be the big decision. Again, I didn't know if I was going to go back into a corporate world, go to PropTech, or go on my own. I made a lot of little decisions along the way that I was really comfortable with that led me down the path to the big decision.
Yeah.
And the big decision made itself.
Totally. I think that's so valuable, and something that I heard you say that really connects with me is just like the comfortability in the uncomfortableness. Like just being in the unknown and being okay with that, to be like, I don't know what's going to happen next. And I have enough, trust in myself or enough confidence to be like, and we will figure it out.
Yeah.
And like, there's at some point, I'm sure you felt this too, but for us, like, there's this feeling of overwhelm because you're thinking about all the steps, right? And you're like, but I'm also on step 2, and so it's like acknowledging that there's a big hill to climb, and also we're here, and so just focus on that one step in front of you. And so that's been one of, I think, my greatest lessons with entrepreneurship, and then has impacted my personal life as well, is like just being okay not knowing, not having all the answers, but trusting in my abilities to figure it all out.
And I wasn't there 10 years ago, 20 years ago. I wanted the full plan, every contingency, everything that could happen. And what I learned was I was wasting a lot of time planning for a place I was never going to get to, because early on, the goal changed, right? And as soon as the goal changes, your plan and your pathway changes to get there. And like at a certain point, I'm like, it's useless. It's like if you work with new construction lease ups, your date for CMO, for occupancy, is constantly changing. I've never worked on new construction where the date hasn't changed. Well, everything else in marketing has to change to adjust for that, because now you've also got seasonality coming into play, and you may need to change your entire spend strategy as well. Things like that teach you when it happens often enough. Like, yeah, you are moving your open house and your grand opening because, and we're going to be losing some deposits on something or whatever, because the date has changed and we can't help that the date's changed. So it gets you good. It makes you a little more comfortable. But I wasn't there, like I said, 10 or 20 years ago. You learn that the hard way.
Yeah, a couple of things I want to, I guess, reinforce is as a planner, as you both just described, in the past, what I find myself doing was also like, let's say now I know the date's going to change, is I would then have a plan to that plan. And so what I ended up doing was optimizing to like the thing that has a 1% chance of happening. And so in reality, and that's where my anxiety or my fear would also come in. The stress level is about like this 1% chance thing happening versus like, hey, just accept like this is the plan now. And if this other thing happens, then you will readjust, kind of to your point, Nicole. And that took me a very long time to figure out. It relieves so much stress if you're like, yeah, I'll figure it out once whatever event happens, but otherwise I'm not going to optimize to this 1%, because there's so many different 1% you can optimize towards, and so many different plans and a lot of energy.
And I think the thing that really proved it to me, frankly, was going through COVID, when all of our offices shut down and we had to continue leasing apartments. How were we going to do it? We didn't know. We couldn't all suddenly shift to self-guided touring through tech partners, because they couldn't handle that amount of business. They were not prepared for it, and it takes time. So we got together as a group, and we put together, within 72 hours, we had a plan of how we were going to work interdepartmentally to not open the offices, but continue leasing. Within a week, we had that plan built out, approved by partners and leadership, and then the next week, training it to the teams. Was it a perfect plan? Heck no. And we changed the plan 16 times since then. But for what we needed to do to accomplish then, we did it. We figured it out, and then we adjusted later. We didn't wait for perfect because we couldn't wait for perfect. Going through that is probably fundamentally one of the biggest things that has impacted my career and my ability and my faith in myself to figure stuff out. But let me say this, it wasn't about me. It was about the team. And what I learned was getting all the right people together to solve big problems together. You go a lot farther together than you do alone. And it wouldn't have happened if it was me figuring out. It was us figuring it out that created the success. And I loved that. But it was a seminal moment for me.
Totally.
Um, one other thing, you touched on your Beyonce song, which I'll now have to listen to. The song that
It's already playing in my head, so
the song I've had on repeat as an entrepreneur is it's called 100 Bad Days, and it's just 100 bad days. The whole point of it is like 100 bad days makes me interesting at parties, and so I was like that's good. So like as an entrepreneur, you're gonna have a lot of bad days, but you then have a lot of good stories that do make you very interesting, and so yeah, that really helped me a lot. A lot of times, like driving into the office, it's like okay, this is just a good thing,
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. It's just a plot twist.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, Laurel, this has been awesome. If people want to get in touch with you or learn more, what's the best way?
A couple of ways. They can either go to my website, lzstrategic.com, which is, by the way, why I named the company that, because it was short and there was a URL available and it was more memorable.
love it.
Right?
Yeah.
So there's that. You can find me. Another way is easily find me on LinkedIn. I'm the only Laurel Zacher on LinkedIn, which makes it really handy. Or just email me, Laurel at LZ I'm right out there and we'll get back to you.
Awesome.
Amazing.
Well,
Well,
thank
thank you
you.
so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. It was great. Thank
Yeah,
you.
it was fun.